All right, let's see here. Hello, hang on, I'm just getting Bruce on. Okay. Let me fix my lighting. Okay, Bruce is getting ready to join. Hello, everyone. Let me just get him on. Okay. Okay. Can everybody hear me? Just a thumbs up is good. Okay.
Yes.
Excellent. So I have Bruce who's signing on right now. I've got my notepad for questions and notes that we can all take. And let me just see how many people we have here. $33. Okay, I just want to thank everyone for joining this call. If you're a member of a Board of Ed, or if you're a school district, or if you're running for the Board of Ed, thank you for being involved and working together on this.
Hi, Kelly. Before, I guess we're waiting for Bruce to get on.
Yep, he's on right now.
Okay, this is Jill Musarino. One of the questions I know I'm going to have, I'm sure others would have, is what would be the cost of joining in this litigation on behalf of a Board of Education, and what implications? I know that I am on Board of Education, and that was a consideration that obviously we would have in becoming involved in something like this. So just, you don't have to address it now, but that would be my question later on.
Okay, I actually do know the answer to that one. It's zero. It's at zero cost to the district. Our goal, Bruce's fee, flat fee, it wasn't just a retainer. It was $50,000. And he did a Zoom meeting where he explained why it was $50,000. And as you can see on our GoFundMe, we're up to almost 60,000. People just keep donating because they feel so passionately about it now, which is fantastic. So he's got what he needs to do it, and now it's just a matter of if people want to join. We have enough plaintiffs, but he has opened it up to school districts because he thinks that's so powerful that it's okay. Like, I have 100 other parents who also want to be named plaintiffs now, and I just tell them it's okay, you're all a part of it. Those named plaintiffs are just representing all the parents and children. So if we win, everybody wins. But for a school district to be also named would send a very strong message, and it also protects the school district. Let me call him and see if he's having trouble. Okay, be right back. Just gonna call Bruce and see if he's having any trouble getting on. Hi, Bruce. are you, do you need any help? Okay, apologies. Yep, get through. Okay, bye-bye. All right, yes, he is doing it right now.
I am here.
Oh, hi, Bruce.
Hi, Kelly. How are you?
Great. So I'm going to mute myself so that it can just go to speaker view for you.
Okay.
And a question that was already asked, Bruce, was how much would this cost a district to join as a plaintiff? And I said what we had talked about before, it's at zero cost to the district because it's already done. It's just a matter of adding them.
Yeah, I mean, if districts simply want to join the case as we have framed it, there should not be any additional expense. There will be other issues, though, raised by the state if districts join, such as, does a district have the legal right to sue the state? That's a minor issue because districts do have the right to sue the state. There's been a lot of case law that government boards, such as planning boards, et cetera, have the right to sue even their own town or county. So there's no issue that a school board has that power. But there is some additional legal issues that probably would be raised by the state, in that event. I mean, it would be helpful if school districts would contribute, say, $5,000 each to the case, because the monies we've raised are budgeted really for legal fees and for any necessary expert if we need one. But frankly, it would be helpful if school districts would contribute a modest amount. If we had 10 or 20 districts joining, for example, and each put in even 2,500, that adds to the case quite significantly. We've raised about 65,000 so far, none of which we have spent yet, in the sense that I have not drawn it down. So our money is sitting there. But frankly, if districts are joining, I think it would be fair that you contribute some amount, which wouldn't be burdensome. So if we had 5 districts joining and each put in 5,000, that would be a great help to the financing. If we had 10 and each put in 5 or 25, again, that would be very useful. And I think it would be appropriate. It's not required, but it would be appropriate. So, but there is no necessary expenditure at this point. So Kelly, how do you want to run the meeting?
Let's start with school districts asking questions,
Okay.
whether they want to ask questions about our lawsuit or where we stand or what would it mean if they join. So school districts, just go ahead.
Hi, this is Stephanie from Brick. We are interested, but I need to see the draft of the complaint so I can send it to our board attorneys just so they can review it. And then I can get a vote from our board, which again, we've been talking about it, so we are interested. And just, to clarify to other boards, for S2, when the district sued the state, we both sued it as a board, as well as I myself sued the state as a private citizen in the complaint that when we went against it. So there is no issue, although, excuse me, I have something in my throat. Although it is a good idea that you have your board attorneys review anything and then discuss it with your boards prior to signing on. So if I can get a copy of the complaint just to forward to my superintendent and my board attorney, so I can get a vote for this Thursday, I think I'm pretty confident Brick's on board.
Okay, we can certainly get you that. We're actually amending the complaint to expand the factual issues. So what we'll send you is the second amended complaint, which will be the more realistic version. Okay.
Perfect. If you can get it to me today or early tomorrow morning, then I could probably have it on our agenda for approval on Thursday and get back to you.
Okay, we'll certainly do that. And I agree, there's no legal issue about boards.
No, there's no legal issue, but just,
State may raise issues, but there's no legal issue.
No, the best course though is just to make sure your board attorneys look at it, just so you're all protected and, and move forward from there, and make sure you get your full board on board and voting on it. So you're covered there too, prior to signing on to anything.
Yeah, I mean, I think in the public interest, the board attorney should look at it. So that's why they're there. So.
But that's great. I appreciate your help with that. Thank you so much.
Sure.
That's important for other districts. I have many other districts email me saying they can't get involved because they can't sue the state. So that's good information to know. So you have sued the state in the past?
There's a big lawsuit right now that is going on with a bunch of districts around the state regarding the S2 funding. So yes, we have sued the state and we have been to court several times. Now, listen, I don't know what's in their policies. I don't know what their, you also, it's not just the board agreeing to it, but you really want your administration on board. So I don't know what their superintendents are saying. I don't like to speak for other districts, but I just wanted to put it out there that yes, indeed, we have been in the middle of a lawsuit. Not only the district, but myself personally in the lawsuit that we put out for S2, I'm named as a person filing, and I'm the board president. So because we needed, in addition to the school board, we needed somebody within the public to do it. And at that point, I felt uncomfortable asking somebody else, so I did it. And there's been no issue. So
any school board member can certainly join a case in their own name. They don't need permission of the board.
Exactly.
School boards can sue and be sued in their own name. They have legal and corporate status, and they can sue the state as well. There's no, and we're not actually suing the state, by the way. We're suing the governor, the commissioner of health, and the commissioner of education, because under the Constitution, a state itself can't be brought into federal court. We have a formula in which we sue the relevant state official for an order directing them to stop the improper practice. So under federal law, we're not actually suing the state anyway. We're actually suing the governor, the commissioner of health, and the commissioner of education. So the extent anyone suggests you can't sue the state, it's not relevant anyway. We don't do that. In federal constitutional law, you do not sue the state in federal court.
Correct. And I think where the confusion might be is I believe there's somewhere in one of our oaths or ethics, or I believe I read it somewhere that we can't sue the district and sit on the board.
That's not true either. That's not true either.
I thought I saw that somewhere. So
I
I thought
know.
maybe that was the confusion.
That's actually not true. You represent the people of the district. This is a misnomer, and it affects local councils too. You're representing the people of the district. If the district acts improperly in some way, you do have the capacity to sue the district, just like a member of Congress can sue the United States if the president's not carrying out a law correctly. If you think your district is violating state law in some way, you always have that right. It's a misnomer that you can't do that. Any board member can sue their district if the district is acting illegally as they see it. You might not be able to sit on that issue on the board and vote on it, but in all other respects, you remain a board member.
Can I ask a question?
Of course.
To Bruce and Kelly, I guess. How do you feel about, letting your board know about this, your superintendent, if you're not sure they would really be aligned?
Quite frankly, it's irrelevant. I don't mean to disagree with Stephanie on this point, but it's legally irrelevant whether the superintendent agrees, knows about it, or has anything to do with it. The district acts through the directions of its board. The individual educational decisions vis-a-vis a student, of course, occur through the administrative apparatus. But with respect to district policy, the board sets that policy, and it's irrelevant what your superintendent has to say about it, frankly. They'll be at your meeting, of course, they normally are, but it's really irrelevant. And frankly, I must disagree in that one point with Stephanie, although it might be politic in your district to have your administrator on board. It's not at all required legally. So I think Stephanie's point was that it's a good idea.
Yeah, exactly. It was more a relationship out of respect, whether you as a board decide to move forward without the superintendent's approval, which is not what you need. You're right. That's irrelevant. Legally, you don't need it. You vote on, even if he puts something up, you as a board are voting on whether or not you're accepting what he's presenting to the board for approval. So that's true. My point was, you definitely need to discuss it with your board, and it's always good practice to make sure your attorney and your superintendent are aware, on board. We happen to have a great relationship, and he's on board with this. But
okay, that's good then. I would say you don't need them on board. it's a good
Right.
idea to at least tell them.
Have the
about it and
conversation,
welcome their
right,
input, right,
right,
welcome their input,
right.
of course.
Exactly.
Right.
So in other words, just to recap, so I should just inform our board and Board of Ed, our superintendent and Board of Ed members that this is going on and ask them if they would consider participating.
I think that if you're a member of a board,
No, I'm not a board member.
Okay.
I'm a parent.
yeah, well, then in that case, you should go to the board and say, we'd like you to consider this issue. Or talk to a private board member privately, and they can introduce the resolution at their meeting. So, yeah, of course. And
Okay.
your
last question.
starting point really should be your board, I think,
Right. Okay. Last
because you're the
question.
constituent.
Right.
You're not a constituent of your super. So and the boards that represent you directly. So
Okay.
I think your starting point's your board, and talk to them first. And it's their job to then bring in their staff to the extent they want to. I think that's the way it really works.
Okay, great. Is there a deadline to trying to get your board involved?
Well, we're going to go to court pretty quickly seeking an injunction. I was actually hoping to do it by yesterday, but we're not ready. And I'd rather do it right than rush it. We're putting affidavits together now from some teachers, students, and some parents. And I'm thinking we're going to file in court probably Thursday, a motion for an injunction. So I don't think we'll get decisions from boards quick enough to join the case at that point. But when you get decisions, we can then either add you in, or we can, file a new complaint to be heard along with it. Okay. But I don't want to wait too long, because school starts, I guess, 2 days after Labor Day.
Right.
And, I'm hoping we'll at least get an initial hearing before then. It's possible the governor will back down, because if cases don't rise or stay stable or go down as the Delta variant has done elsewhere, he may just, see the wind in the air and back down and say, well, cases have dropped, now we can put this off. Also, if a few school boards do become very vocal, he may wonder about the situation he's in. So it's possible he may back down. But we want to get filed this week no matter what. So I doubt we're going to get boards in on time. Okay.
But
A very important thing would be that even if we don't, if we have 10 boards that want to join, we just announce it to the media. That alone is very powerful. So even if you're not in the case immediately and it takes a few days longer.
Bruce, if we amend it, oh, I'm sorry, Jill. If we amend it, so let's say we file the official brief with the injunction on Thursday, and now we have 10 school boards who come up on Friday morning, or all right, we all want to join.
Mhm.
And you amend it, that doesn't restart the clock, does it?
No. We can,
Okay,
the way it works in federal court, we can keep amending until the other side answers. And then we get one more free amendment. And then you ask the court to amend further. But we can always file a new case with school boards and tell the court clerk, assign this to the same judge hearing the parent and student case. So if the school board case will be heard by that judge in conjunction with it at the same time. Okay. So I wouldn't worry about that at all. Either we can amend it, or we just file a new case that runs concurrently before the same judge. Our judge presently is Judge Kevin McNulty in federal court, who sits in Newark. I don't know whether he will stay on the case, because if we're seeking a more emergent order and he happens to be on vacation, it might get assigned to another judge and it might stay with that judge. So it depends. It's possible we may not have Judge McNulty. I'm not certain.
Bruce, I had a question. My name is Jill Muserino. I'm on the Board of Education in Washington Township, Morris County. Lorraine, to your point, I was made aware of this by a constituent. And to be honest with you, I literally just learned about what's going on. I did not have an opportunity to read through the complaint, but I thought it would be helpful for myself and maybe others on the call, if you could kind of give a brief overview of what the complaint is alleging, and what is the relief that's being sought, and what is the general process in terms of what we can expect in a timeline, and really what the ultimate goal is. I know you mentioned an injunction, but if there's something else, I think that would be very helpful for me to bring back to my Board of Ed to discuss it about, potentially becoming involved.
Sure. Thank you, Jill. I'm happy to do that. First of all, let me point out the current complaint was filed before the governor issued his latest order. And that order, originally he said, I'm going to leave it optional to school districts. So we sued on the grounds that he doesn't have the right to authorize school districts to do this. I don't believe school districts actually have any power of health regulation. So we sued on the grounds that he doesn't have the right to authorize school districts to do this. And if they do it, it is unconstitutional for various reasons. So the new complaint is going to have to reference his August 6th order, which specifically mandates it in all schools, mandates mandatory masking. So there's going to be an amendment to the complaint to reference that new executive order. I don't believe that's currently, it might be on the filed version. I don't remember whether we amended it at that point. But basically what we're seeking is a permanent injunction barring the governor or the commissioner of education or commissioner of health or any school board from enforcing any mandatory masking order. And the basis of the case is simply that this impairs and intrudes upon First Amendment rights of speech, association, and privacy that attach to students and to some degree teachers. What this means is that, now of course the masking order doesn't stop students from speaking. They can still speak on any subject they want. They can complain about the mask. They can speak of other subjects. They can say God doesn't exist at the lunch table, if there is a lunch table. Their right to speak itself is not stopped. So what this means is that in constitutional law, where the order does not directly bar speech, but incidentally affects speech, the state has to prove a substantive state interest that the regulation seeks to achieve by the narrowest means possible. If the order burdens direct First Amendment rights, then the state has to show a compelling governmental interest. Now, all this differs from what we call a rational basis that attaches to most laws. You know, let's say the governor orders that classes begin at 8 o'clock instead of 8:30 to make up time we lost last year. Well, that's not a First Amendment issue. Then the court only looks to see, is there a reasonable basis for the order? But where the order directly affects constitutional rights or incidentally burdens them, there's a much higher standard. And that's either the substantial interest test or the compelling interest test. And in any case, the government must use the narrowest means necessary to protect that state interest. Is there an interest in mitigating COVID? Of course, the state has an interest in doing that. The means it applies must be the narrowest means possible. Now, we're seeking an injunction, which means we want an order barring the executive order's mandatory mask order. The reason is that although it doesn't directly stop speech, it so burdens and impairs speech that it effectively eliminates the First Amendment right. In addition, it interferes with associative rights, the right of free association. How does a student make a friend, continue a friendship, start a friendship, if they can't see each other's face? If they're so chilled in their willingness to speak because of the mask that no one talks to each other. We have one student who's going to who signed an affidavit that says the hallways are deadly silent. And she says it's a scary scene to see absolute silence in the halls. And we have a lot of evidence that the masking actually inhibits speech. It so chills the willingness to talk that no one speaks to each other. It eliminates the ability to pursue friendships. Students can't meet new students because people are so closed in with the mask that no one is speaking to each other. So the total effect of the masking order, though it sounds benign on the surface, is completely destructive of the speech and associative rights of the students. In addition, it's so unnatural to be forced to go about 6 to 10 hours a day this way. The impairment of breathing, the soggy mask that gets clogged with food and water all day long, the discomfort, the unnatural state of having this forced on you as a child especially, that it actually violates the right of privacy and autonomy of the child. Now, is the state using the most narrow means to achieve the interest of mitigating disease in the schools? That's really the test. I think we can establish for the court that there's a severe impact on First Amendment rights, which don't go only to political speech. Now, one thing you may hear from some of your counsel is that the speech that is regulated by the First Amendment or protected is political speech. In other words, speech on political issues, speech on philosophy, literature, things of that nature. Well, that's not actually true. The First Amendment right of association has advanced to ordinary social relationships and ordinary social speech. And so when a state order impairs the very ability of children to develop friendships, it chills the willingness of people to speak to each other. And we have students who will say no one participates in class anymore, and teachers will say that, and they're signing affidavits to that effect. When we have silent hallways instead of the hallways filled with noise when students are speaking to each other. When we have lunch situations in which one child sits on one end of a table and another on the other, and they're 8 feet apart, they can no longer speak without everyone overhearing the conversation. When we have children isolated at desks at lunch and can't speak, all of this impairs speech itself and the association rights of children. One court actually described it at Ponce de Leon High School in Florida in an unrelated case and said it's a typical high school scene where there's immense conversation and discussion in the cafeterias and hallways, often of an intimate nature. And the court said on a gay rights issue, children often speak privately and quietly about these issues. Well, how do you do that when you have to shout across 8 feet of a table in the lunchroom? No longer do you have 10 kids sitting together and kids can whisper and talk with each other. No longer will students be able to have that conversation because their faces are covered, they can't hear each other, their voices are muffled, and they often have to be 6 feet apart. Now, when no one else in the state has to do this, and only children in school have to do it, we not only have a burden on their First Amendment rights, but we have an equal protection violation. Children and adults in other settings will mix freely with or without vaccination, in synagogues, churches, mosques, concerts, restaurants, even bars sometimes, all without any restraints under the governor's orders. No distance, no masking, no plastic dividers, but school children uniquely are subject to this in school. Now, if these same children can mix with adults freely at weddings, bar mitzvahs, communion parties, anniversary parties for hours on end with no restraint, or in restaurants or concerts or other places or shopping malls, why is there a compelling interest of the government to do this to children and adults in the classroom, which is really not even a public place and has limited people coming in and out? So we have an equal protection problem as well as a burden on First Amendment rights. So that's the essence of the case. All right, so I hope I didn't go on too long. The rights of children in school are not limited to speaking on political subjects. The whole doctrine started in the Vietnam War in a case called Tinker v. Des Moines, where students wore a black armband and they were suspended. And the Supreme Court said they have the right to speak. This is an important issue for children. But the court also said the interpersonal communication of children in school, in the hallways and the cafeteria, is vital to their education. And the court protects even the casual conversation of children in schools against unreasonable impairment. That's all balanced against the need to run an academic program. You can't talk about your favorite movie while the teacher's giving a history lesson, and basic discipline. But outside of that, children have almost the full level of rights that adults have. One court described the public school as a public forum for children, even though the rest of the public is not admitted. And the cafeteria, the hallway, even the classroom are forums for children. That's really where they see everybody else in their day-to-day life. So a masking order that chills expression almost all day long, and we have evidence to show that, really impairs these rights. And when only children are burdened with it, and probably because of concern from the teachers union, and no one else in society in similarly situated circumstances is, we have what we call an equal protection violation as well. And so on the basis, on the basis of these theories of law, which are not theories, they're tried and true doctrines, we are asking the court to declare the executive order unconstitutional and bar its enforcement. And that is the case. The injunction proceeding will get heard promptly, probably about 2 weeks after we file it. We may have a few days in which the court won't be able to act and school will have started. We'll get an answer quickly, without question. And if we should lose in the trial court, we immediately can appeal to the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Third Circuit, which handles federal appeals in New Jersey, as well as Pennsylvania, Delaware, and the Virgin Islands. Now, if the state loses and we win, I doubt the governor will appeal. Quite frankly, I think he'd drop it and would be wise to. If we should lose, and we may very well the first time out, that happens frequently, we go up on appeal. And let me say this, the Court of Appeals will have the same jurisdiction as a trial court in a case like this, because the factual issues are not really in dispute. It's really a legal question. Does this practice burden First Amendment rights? And is the state using the narrowest means possible to achieve this goal? So this is the essence of the case. I want to say this. There's a bit of a misnomer out there in the community. Most cases that have gone to court to challenge COVID rules around the country have won. There's a sense that you can't go to court and win. Most cases have won. Some cases have lost, of course. In Connecticut and Tennessee, some parents challenging masking orders did lose. They were challenging the authority of the governor to issue the order. But the legislature in those cases had ratified it, so the court said the case is moot. But generally, the courts have ruled against these overreaching COVID regulations. Not in every case, but in most. I'm sorry, there's a question, but I didn't see it just now.
I actually have two questions. My name is Heather, if that's okay.
Yes, sure.
Okay. So with regard to this executive order, we are all reading the verbiage as parents and telling our school districts that we believe that there's a lot of subjective language in the executive order, that they, for instance, it says they have to implement a policy regarding masks. And we're asking them, that do they have any leeway with this? And they're saying, no, we have to just do exactly what he said. And they have to have masks on all day long, except when they're eating.
I agree.
Is that true, or is there?
I agree with that analysis. I think they're right.
They are right. Okay. So there's
The
no
order is clearly mandatory. It states every district shall implement a mandatory masking policy for students, staff, and teachers, and it lists exceptions. So it's quite clear by listing exceptions to the policy that are permitted that it's otherwise meant to be mandatory. I don't think there's any doubt about that.
Okay.
I realize it's written in a strange way. He doesn't say, I mandate masking for all students and teachers. He says every district is required to maintain a mandatory masking policy. But it's quite well intended. It's intended to be mandatory. I don't think it's fair to read the order any other way.
Okay. And so if children are saying, in there it says, if, unless they can't breathe, if children are saying they can't breathe and going to the nurse's office every single day, are they going to leave them mask on them? It's just, there's so many variables here.
Well, that it is true that there's very little way of enforcing it, and not enforcing it, but the enforcement is arbitrary. There's really no standard. All right. And I'm glad you mentioned, I'll make a note of that. But really the exceptions are very narrow. They really require a clear medical issue. And merely because a child has trouble breathing, unless they're diagnosed with a medical condition, the order will not protect that child.
Okay.
And we had, many horror stories of children being ordered repeatedly to put the masks on constantly all day long. It's a new form of discipline that's entered the schools. It's actually interfered with education.
Yeah. My son complains. He's afraid he's going to get in trouble.
Exactly. We've heard this over and over.
Mm-hmm.
But I must say, though, the order is mandatory. I don't think there's any doubt about that.
Okay.
I don't think there's any wiggle room in that regard. There's a little wiggle room in terms of what you just said. If a student complains repeatedly they can't breathe, will the school nurse have some flexibility? I think yes. But in general, it's a mandatory order, and we're treating it as such.
Well, another thing, I'm just thinking about this out loud, is it says when the children are eating, if a child's sitting at their desk drinking their bottle of water and having a snack, most of the day, it says they can't wear a mask. They don't have to wear a mask while they're eating. So what's to prevent a student from sitting at their desk, drinking their water and having their snack?
Well, because you're only allowed to do that in most cases during snack time or lunchtime. Students often, I think, nowadays have a bottle of water with them, and I think they're free to drink that when they want. But quite frankly, many of the teachers have stopped that because of the mask issue. And so that is inhibiting students who normally would drink water frequently. We have one student who says, I drink water all day long. I can't anymore. I'm not permitted to by the teachers. Some teachers would let me, others won't. So that's another example of the unequal capacity to enforce. It doesn't really make much sense that everybody else in the state can sit and sip water or tea anytime they want, but students in classrooms have to be masked all day and really prohibited from doing a natural human function. Nowadays people carry water bottles with them. When I was in school, you had to walk out to the water fountain and get a pass. You couldn't sit there all day long drinking. But today people have water bottles. And so it's natural for children now to drink all day long, especially athletes. So it does inhibit that process. And I'm going to make a note of that. I'm glad we're having this meeting. You're giving me some ideas. The natural process of drinking water is now inhibited all day long.
Right.
And that's actually important because, people working in a workspace, even in a cubicle, who normally would wear a mask under the old orders, could stop anytime they want to drink water. Nobody would interfere with them. But here, the order is barring that. And the teacher actually disciplines you and prohibits it, except during the snack time or the recess.
Well, and Bruce, just as I'm also, besides being on the board, I'm a teacher, water fountains in school are closed.
Oh,
So the only access children have to water at this point is the bottled water that they bring in or are provided by the school.
let me ask you, as a teacher, is it common for kids nowadays to bring a water bottle in? Like
Everybody, they are in my district, in many districts, I'm in, well, obviously I'm in Gloucester County. My son is in a different district, and my nieces are in a different district. They have all been told to bring their own water because the water fountains, the public water fountains are closed.
Oh,
or
no, I
covered.
actually meant something differently. I meant before COVID. Is it common for kids to bring water bottles?
Some did. For those that had issues, usually medically, a couple here or there, not a lot, because honestly, it can create quite a problem when they fall, or they don't cap them up, or they play with the bottle. So
I assume
yeah.
older kids, though, in high school, say, probably have water bottles all the time.
Well, my son's in middle school, and the only time he would bring it would be for gym. He would
Okay.
use it for gym. But there's just a caveat to that's why many kids have water bottles now, is because they don't have access to the water fountains.
Okay, that's very helpful to know. Ms. Natalie Contessa made a note that.
Yes, I raised my hand.
Yeah, yes.
I'm
Also,
sorry.
I just want to interrupt. We have several people with hands raised, so we will get to you all.
Okay, I have as much time as you all need, so don't worry about it. The question is, the school doesn't have the right to inform the parents that the child wants a neutral gender reference. Well, that's an example of the privacy right. I'm glad you mentioned that attaches to students. They really have a lot of independent rights that exist outside of their parental control. Now, the school can't do something to the kid without the parent knowing, but the student has many rights that the parent has no right to know about. If the student discusses Karl Marx and says, I like communism, the teacher has no right to call the parent and say, I want you to know your kid likes communism. That would actually violate a child's First Amendment rights. So, similarly, if a student is friendly with someone and teacher thinks it's not a good person, say a gang member, a teacher has no right to call the parent, nor does the school. And so there are rights that are clearly attached to children. So I'm glad you mentioned that. Thank you. So I've given you a good summary of where we are. And the order will bar, before we get to questions, let me just tell you what the remedy is. The remedy would be a declaratory judgment declaring the order unconstitutional and an injunction barring its enforcement. And that would actually prevent school boards from independently doing this once the executive order is vacated, because the order is going to cover the subject matter of masking of children in schools. So there'd be no wiggle room afterwards for school boards to say, okay, we're going to do it on our own initiative, because we've designed the complaint to deal with the whole state action. And in that respect, school boards are subdivisions of the state. If the state can't do it, a school board can't, unless there's a separate statutory process, which there is not. The other point I'd raise, and some of you may disagree with me, I don't believe school boards have any general power of health regulation of this nature anyway. Certainly the Commissioner of Health mandates vaccinations, and there's a process by which a sick child is referred to the school nurse. But the school districts don't have any power to impose health regulations in general. And so I don't think they could independently order masking, because I don't think there's a statutory authority to do so. But in any event, this case will bar the process, if we win, of masking throughout the state in the public and private schools. It won't bar private schools from doing it. I take that back. They might have their own capacity to do that, but it will bar public schools from doing so. It would also vacate the governor's order as to private schools. Right now, he's ordering private schools also to follow this practice. So if we win, which I think we should, there's no guarantee in law, First thing we're taught in law school is never promise a result, which I can't. The order will vacate the governor's executive order. There will be no mandatory masking in public or private schools. Public schools won't have the power to order it. Private schools would probably retain that right. But anyone who wants to mask would almost certainly have the right to do so as a voluntary matter. Any child who wanted to probably would have the First Amendment right to mask if they wish. I think probably only about 10% would, but they would have that right. So the goal is to declare the mandatory order unconstitutional and have it vacated. So that's a summary. I hope it's been helpful to you. You've sort of got a crash course in constitutional law as well. Let me just warn you, and I don't mean to criticize board counsel. Constitutional law is a kind of subtle art. There are a lot of assumptions many lawyers have. Health interests of the state do not take priority over the Constitution. There is a balancing, and the state, when it pursues a health interest, must use the narrowest means possible to avoid any significant intrusion into First Amendment rights. And merely because the state has a health power or police power does not give the state the power to impose this masking mandate, which has very severe burdens on privacy, association, and speech rights of children. And although it doesn't target speech, its effect is so intrusive that it really eliminates speech, and we'll have certifications from children that will make that clear. So I'm here for questions as well. So I'll leave Kelly to call upon people or just call out if it's not intrusive to the list.
Okay, I think Jackie had her hand up the longest. Jackie?
Hi, how are you? I have a question in regards, I know there's the mask mandate stuff, and like if your son or daughter has like a chronic issue, probably you would not want them to take off the mask, but at the same time, you don't want them to wear it all day long.
Correct.
So I know that, you know, Governor Murphy has ruled out the option, and I'm not saying everyone should be keeping their kids at home or doing online learning.
He's ruled it out, that's right.
Right, but I feel like, and I know some parents have to go back to work, but at least if you have an older child in high school, whatever, at least give the parents the option. I'm not saying, because I know before probably, you know, they don't want to keep parents home so that they don't have to pay for them, you know, to find a babysitter to sit with them home, and then they, you know, going to get laid off from work or whatever. But for the parents that want that option, at least just give the option. If you want your child to do online learning, at least have that option, because what if my daughter has chronic health issues, she has chronic asthma, for example, and sinus issues. And during the regular fall season or, you know, fall, winter season, she's always very, very sick, pneumonia, like completely, like she can be out for 2-3 weeks. Well, if she goes in the middle of this pandemic, I mean, I'm very concerned. She got vaccinated and everything, but again, there's people that are vaccinated and they're getting, you know, the Delta. And I was reading something on the news yesterday. They were saying, I forgot which place it was, 5,000, one of the townships, 5,000 something students ended up, you know, getting really sick from COVID, and they have an emergency meeting today. I'm not sure if anyone saw that.
Well, I don't know about that, but the point, I didn't mean to interrupt you. I'm sorry, Jackie.
That's okay.
Go on, I'm sorry.
So I just wanted to know if there's a way that we can also at least give the parents the option if they choose, just like we had before, you know, we like before school ended, like they gave the option. Some people went back, and some people, this would make everyone comfortable or happy, at least to a certain extent. If you want the parents if the parents want to mask their children, that's fine. If they don't want, that's fine too. If they want, you know, their kids to do online learning, that should also be optional. Especially
Well,
with
the problem with that is legally that parents don't have the right to direct a particular kind of educational program. The state has the right to do that. Once you send your kids to a public school, you're basically stuck with the educational program the state mandates. You have the right to educate your kid at home or go to a private school, or if your district has a hybrid program, take advantage of it. But some parents who do homeschooling do send their kids to public school for certain specialized classes, like foreign language class or whatever it might be, or sports or gym. But you don't really have the right legally to demand a certain type of educational program. Now, that being said, when adults were subject to the masking order, and they worked in their, let's just say you work in an office with cubicles. Most adults had the option to work at home and still do. So you could avoid the burden of the mask all day long by working at home and going into the office when you were needed. Obviously, as you say, children don't have that option under the current order. So unlike adults who could stay at home and protect themselves from this burden, children don't have that right. So we could make the point in the case, as you've said, that children are under burden adults will never put under. Like an adult could stay home from work in nearly every case, except jobs that require to be present somewhere. But children can't under this order. They don't have that option. So I will consider that argument. There's a danger, though. The danger is that the court might agree with me and say, okay, we'll leave the mask mandate in place, but we'll add in a requirement that the state allow kids to do virtual learning.
No.
So the problem with that is that it's an easy win, so to speak, but it also amounts to a loss. We're giving the court a way to deal with the issue without taking it head on. And so if I make this argument, the danger is that the court will accept it, leave the mask mandate in place, but give an option to be opting out. At the moment, I don't have authority from the client base to do that. If I did it, I'm really afraid the judge will agree with me. And basically we'll lose the main point.
All right, and plus, you know me, Bruce, my son desperately wants to go to school. He can't physically wear a mask. So.
That's the problem. So I think that for me to make this argument in a global case is a way to win that point, but lose the main point. And then students who really want to be in school because they really don't want to learn virtually, many of them have told me, my own law students, I teach at Rutgers Law School, have told me they hate being home in their bedrooms on the computer. They have no motivation. So we might win that, Jackie, but the problem is that many students won't want that. And they'll feel compelled to go and wear the mask, and we still have lost the main point. So I'm a little leery, though I think you're absolutely right, I'm a little leery of the issue, if you understand what I'm saying.
Right, I understand, and just that, like, I think like everybody's looking at everybody's looking at from their perspective or their situation.
Yeah.
But I feel like, the kids who are, I don't want to say it's not a disability per se, but in a way it kind of is. They're like they're lost in kind of in the middle. It's like, well, yeah, I want my daughter to go to school, that's fine. But at the same time, when we don't have the masks on, that it's more fear on me as a parent. Well, now, even if my daughter's masked, but some other people are not masked, even if they're vaccinated, with this whole Delta thing, it just, just scary for me as a parent, knowing that she gets so sick. I can't even imagine with this Delta thing, how she would be. And she's in high school, but at the same time, like, at the same time, I'd rather her be home safe than her be there. And I'm like, my heart is in my hands, I don't know what to expect. What would happen.
I don't know the answer, frankly, and I'm a little concerned about this particular issue because I might win for someone in your child's position, but then lose it overall for virtually everybody else. And it's really a problem because I've had this experience where you go in with an argument like that and it's perfectly logical and the court goes with it, but you lose the main point. So it would be a Pyrrhic victory in a sense. It would be good for some kids, like your daughter, like your child's, but it would actually not solve the problem for the overwhelming majority. Let me think about that. And you can always write to Kelly at freenjkids@gmail.com to discuss that issue further. And she can put you directly in touch with me if you'd like.
And then if I could I love all the comments and the points. Since this was supposed to be Board of Education member questions, if we could just move to Board of Education members with specific questions. And like Bruce said, he does have extra time. If you're a parent with a particular question, you can save that for the end, but just so we give the Board of Education members their time. Go ahead, Board of Education members. Make it pithy.
I have a question. It's Lisa Contessa with Tom's River School Board.
Okay.
Yeah, by the way, I'm losing the vision I'm losing the picture if we need that. We don't need it, but the visuals are gone, so.
That's people's choice.
Oh, okay. Go ahead, Lisa.
I turned my video off because my hair
That's
is
fine.
not
Oh, no, I
fixed.
just didn't know whether. No, I didn't know whether we had a technical issue. That's okay.
Yeah, our meeting is Wednesday, our public meeting. We had our committee meeting and we were aware of this lawsuit. We discussed it briefly in our executive session. At that point, I don't think Tom's River, our president, really decided whether or not we would join as a district. I hope we do. I personally will, as a board member, as a parent, certainly not representative of the entire board unless we get a vote and that happens. So could you just repeat your full name? Who exactly is leading the lawsuit? How many parents so far? How many teachers participating? How many districts on board? So I can just report some of that information, and how quickly can I get a copy of the complaint?
Well, I'll have Kelly either later today or by tomorrow morning, get everyone who wants a copy of the complaint. I'll get her the second amended complaint, which we're about to file. You'll have that. The first version may be outdated already. My name is Bruce Afran, A-F-R-A-N, and I practice constitutional law. I teach First Amendment law at Rutgers Law School in Newark. And, I've been involved in many cases similar to this and other public interest cases. Free NJ Kids is the overall group that has retained me and has raised funding for the case. We have, if I can get out of my full screen, I can probably give you an exact answer to your question.
While you're looking for that, Bruce, freenjkids.com is the website I created that has, from the very beginning, we have introducing Bruce, the merits of the case, our spots on Fox News and CNN, and updates on the case, and the original complaint. As Bruce said, he's going to send us all the second amended complaint from the August 6th news. But at least you can see the original complaint because he puts in all those arguments, the First Amendment, equal protection and all that.
Yeah,
That's
they're
right on the website.
Excellent. Thank you.
I mean, I could also send you, I suppose, a draft. We can consider sending people a draft of the brief as well. It's not completely finished and it doesn't yet have all the inserts. I'm not sure I want to send it out yet, but the complaint does explain the basis of the case. We
You
have
about 10 parents, right?
Sorry?
10 parents?
No, we have 4 parents and we have 11 students as plaintiffs. So we have other people who called me, probably a good dozen more, but I don't know whether I'm going to add everyone into the complaint because it's not really necessary at this point, just to add more parents, and we have enough people for standing. So we have 4 families and 4 parents and 11 children who are wanted to appear in their own names. Their names are used as initials in the court case because they're minors, with the exception of one who is over 18, whose name is used. So we have people from about 6 or 7 different school districts represented, and enough of a cross-reference of the state, and it's said to be on behalf of all others similarly situated. So we have enough people for standing in the case. School boards and school board members would be a different component of standing. So it'd be very good to be able to add you into the case. At this point, we're proceeding with parents and students. I don't recall offhand if any of the parents are teachers, but we have 3 teachers who are signing certifications discussing the effect of masking in their schools in May last year. So we have teachers who are submitting certifications, and we have probably half dozen students and parents who will submit certifications in which they describe the impact on them caused by masking during the last school year.
Does that answer your question?
Yes, it does. I couldn't get the mute button.
All right,
Thank you
I
very
know,
much.
that's all right. All right, next Board of Education member.
Hi, my name is Michelle. I'm from Franklin Township in Gloucester County.
Okay.
I'm a board member, and my question is twofold. In regards to the mask mandate, is it possible for the board to create policy that can require certain times for the mask to be not on? And what are the implications to the type of mask that a student wears to school?
Well, that's one of the problems with the governor's order. It doesn't say anything. It doesn't say what kind of masks have to be used, what types of breaks are permitted, when it needs to be. And so in a sense, he's leaving it up to the school districts to fill those gaps. So a school could say, you know, there must be a 5-minute break every hour. There must be a lunch break. There must be at least 2 15-minute breaks for mask usage. There must be water breaks every hour. Whatever, the school could fill the gaps in with those types of policy changes. What kind of masks? I mean, the only one that really works is an N95, but you can't put that on kids. It's really meant for tradesmen, so particulate doesn't get into their lungs. You know,
Right. I
it's
mean,
so restrictive, you can't put that on children.
we have
So-
parents who are contemplating sending their kids with masks that are mesh, that are basically not really a mask. So,
Well, that's the governor's problem. He didn't
Right.
bother stipulating.
right.
So as far as I'm concerned, you know, you have a lot of flexibility. He doesn't explain what kind of mask to use. You know, and as a result, I think any mask that's a mask probably works. And so I think a school district does have the authority, as he's written the order, to do anything reasonable. Now, if a mesh mask really does not inhibit the flow of air, it's probably not a mask, as the governor's order suggests. But frankly, you know, let the governor go take it to court. You know, he can't do anything to you, and it's his own order that fails to reasonably describe what he wants. And I think he did that deliberately, in part so that people could probably avoid the order if they could find ways around it. Because he was very reluctant to issue this order, and I think he came under pressure from the Biden administration, which wanted at least Democratic states to speak with a single voice on the issue. But he didn't do this initially. He was very reluctant. And that's why I think he's left wiggle room, frankly. So yes, you do have some flexibility.
All right. Michelle, does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
Okay,
Welcome.
great. Next Board of Ed member.
Hi, Bruce. This is
Hello.
Josh Akins,
Hi, Josh.
board president up in Lafayette, Sussex County. I do have a question regarding the 251. So the boards can and have to accept this policy as it is. However,
Well, that's a debatable proposition, but the safe approach is to accept it and then go to court to challenge it. I'm not sure the governor has this authority under law, but the safe approach is to assume so and go to court to challenge it.
and our council told us the same thing as well.
Right.
My board last year, we leveraged those exemptions to remove the masks from the kids indoors probably 2 or 3 weeks prior to the governor allowing the statewide masks to be removed, because the school wasn't air conditioned. Not every school throughout the state is air conditioned.
Right.
He changed the language. 175 said excessive heat. Now it says extreme heat. Now I know there's no legal definition for excessive and or extreme. There's
What is it, right?
there's a level of reasonableness. There can, in your opinion, so taking apart exemption A into 2 different pieces, when doing so would inhibit the individual's health, comma. Now the health can be social, emotional, mental, and physical well-being. Is that correct?
And in my view, it inhibits every kid's health. To sit there
Correct.
literally all day long, not breathing in a normal way in itself is inhibiting. Now, obviously, the governor doesn't mean that, because the order would be meaningless. But it's his own fault, really. I mean, I think that if you conclude as a district that masking is in fact harming children's health overall, because it interferes with the functioning of a body system, and I guess the safe approach would be to have a doctor agree with you. I think you're within your rights, frankly, to disregard it. You know, it's a bit of a risky proposition, but I don't think, if you have a good faith basis and you hold a board meeting and you have people testify and you have evidence showing why you're acting as you're acting, I think you're acting lawfully. The governor seems to have left it in your hands. And what is extreme heat? I can tell you.
Exactly.
If I sleep with 75 degrees at night, I think that's extreme. I put the air on. So what is extreme heat? And when you're not breathing, especially, it's exacerbated.
So the real question is, because I know you said that the boards really have no power here, and I'm actually thinking we do have power by breaking some of these exemptions apart, as my district did last year, by stating that there is no there's nothing in this executive order that says who makes the determination of whether this individual's health has been inhibited. And there
Correct.
is no determination as to define what is extreme heat. So I think the boards have this gray area, and you're the legal expert, I'm not, have this gray area to not come up with something that is in contradiction to this policy, but to go kind of in between it.
Mhm. I think what Bruce was saying, I don't mean to speak for you, Bruce, because
Sure.
you're brilliant. He was saying
Not
that
necessarily.
aside from the executive order, if the executive order goes away in another place and time, the boards don't have this authority to. control
Yeah,
the
let me,
But
right.
he
Yeah.
supports the wiggle room that you're talking about.
Yeah, what I was saying was, I don't think boards have the authority on their own to issue generalized health regulations.
Mhm.
You do have the authority, I think, to put a process in place when a teacher thinks a kid is sick, sending the kid to the school nurse, for example. But outside of that, I don't think you have any generalized health power. That's not to say you don't have the right to interpret the governor's order in a way that's reasonable. So I
Okay.
think that's what I meant, frankly.
Do you feel that wiggle room within that exemption itself gives boards sort of a carte blanche to say you can have this mask mandate as optional? I mean, the board could make the determination themselves to say that we determine that this will impact or inhibit an individual's mental and social health.
And
I
then
think-
have a board meeting, testify, have a doctor
Right.
support it.
I mean,
think
you're not
you need
gonna,
to do
the
it.
problem is you're not going to get a doctor to sign off on this because all the doctors are in line with each other.
I don't know that that's really true. I think that it's not easy, frankly, but I know doctors who have a different viewpoint. Well, forgetting doctors then, you can, use a psychologist then. That's fine.
Yeah.
That's a medical question. I think, look, it's obvious the governor wants mandatory masking except for exceptions. However, I mean, I didn't really study it from the point of view you're raising. In other words, how to get around it, because I wasn't concerned with that issue. But now that you're all addressing it, there's a lot of wiggle room there. And
There-
it strikes
there is,
me that if you hold a hearing and you have parents testify as to the problems that kids have had, and you have a psychologist come in and explain the emotional impact this is having on children. And I can tell you, I've had 1 or 2 certifications, and it's rather horrifying to read. One student says she has constant headaches all day long. She's never had this before. One student even says her contact lenses keep tearing because the air from under the mask hits her eyes, and she never had this problem before. So, there is a great deal of anxiety also that arises from this. So I think if you hold a hearing and you have people testify and you have a reasonable evidentiary record, and if you could get some medical people, such as social workers or psychologists or a physician, to speak to this type of generalized harm, I think you've at least acted reasonably. Nobody could suggest you're deliberately disagreeing, obeying the order. I got to admit, it's a bit of a gray area because he clearly wants mandatory masking, but I think you have that right to do. And
Yeah, I mean, he's left that gray area wide open, and he did in the last one in 175 as well. And no one said anything to us when we did it. So.
Right. Also, I think that the fact that he says each district shall maintain a policy clearly says that we expect districts will have their own ideas to a substantial degree.
Correct.
And I think you can actually have a policy of masking in the halls, but not in the classroom.
Yep.
Especially if you have those damn dividers up. So you could easily say there's no need for masking in the classroom when strangers don't come in, but when kids mix in the halls, we'll have masking. I think there's enough wiggle room in his order that you can interpret it in different ways.
Okay. Thank you. That's really what I wanted to hear. So I appreciate it, and I appreciate everything you guys are doing.
Well, and also, by the way, it may depend on the size of the school. Some schools are larger, some are smaller. Anyway, I think there's plenty of room there to work. And by the way, that's what law is about. It's about finding solutions to problems. And we look into something like that and do exactly what you've done. So thank you.
I think I'm going to move to Lafayette until we win our case.
We were one of the few schools that was open all year, 5 days a week. So come on
Wow,
up.
good for you guys. I'm going to shout you guys out. Lafayette in Sussex County. Thank you. Thank you, Josh. All right. How about another board member?
Is that, yeah, are there any other questions or thoughts?
Yeah, I have a question. Rich Eversbach in Ringwood, Board of Ed. And thank you very much for having this meeting today. It's been very enlightening. So I think as a board member, what we're, our very goal is to really give the parents the option whether or not they want their child wearing a mask, because some of them do. So that being said, we at the same time need to, figure out a way to make this, legally okay. So could we just, and based on what the previous conversation was with Josh, is as a board, would there be a way to inform the parents or advise the parents to come up with the medical exemption, however that may be done, so they are able to, something that works on a broad scale? Because I don't know if it's going to be half the students are going to want it, and how many people really care about what is going on with their kid during the day with the mask. But certainly there are significant numbers. Can you kill that? Significant numbers that don't want it. So as a board, could we, just based on what you had just advised, I believe it was to parents having a medical or getting around this as a parent, as the board, could we make a policy then supporting them and really giving them a path to follow in that respect?
Well, it's really, Rich, it's really interesting what you're saying. There's an old tradition in law of jury nullification, in which, a lawyer will invite a jury to disregard the law subtly. Basically, you're almost suggesting that it's a form of civil disobedience to say to parents, look, you got the right to have a medical exemption, go get one if you don't want your kids wearing a mask or if they don't. I would say, in many cases, any kid with asthma probably has a right to the medical exemption. That's a large category of children, okay? Any kid with any sort of, ironically, if you have any sort of, well, I wouldn't say immune disorder, there's a lot of room there for medical exemptions. I think a child with asthma certainly has the basis for it. So a parent can be invited to go to their doctor and get a letter. In many cases, a doctor will issue it. Doctors might not, though. They might say, no, it's not serious enough. Your breathing won't be impaired. To some degree, doctors are biased because they spend all day wearing a mask. And so they function, and they may not be thinking in terms of what it's doing to a kid who's not getting paid $300,000 a year to wear the mask and is not able to ignore the discomfort. And so doctors may be a bit biased, but yes, you can definitely invite your parents to seek out exemptions, and you can even look it over and suggest the list of common maladies that might very well support exemption.
And how about in addition to pursuing medical exemptions, what about psychological or emotional or based on legal? So so the board really doesn't.
Yeah, emotional, certainly, yes.
The board doesn't want to make a legal challenge, but if the parent specifically said, look, this violates, our, and put the challenge to the district, then it puts them kind of in a corner. Are they going to enforce this or not, in that respect? And then also for the emotional and mental aspects, do you really need a physical or a physician, say, for a physical reason, or are there other avenues to take, as a mental or an emotional impetus?
Any emotional or psychological condition can give rise to this. For example, many people have therapy dogs. Why? Because they have some emotional problem and they use a therapy dog. It's a pretty loose standard. And I think anybody with an anxiety condition, any sort of psychological problem, any emotional issues, any emotional disabilities, probably can qualify. You need a psychologist most likely to write the letter, but I think absolutely that can be done. Frankly, you know, if kids would simply refuse en masse to wear it, there's not a damn thing anybody can do about it. That's one potential. Young kids aren't going to do that, but although I remember in 4th grade leading a delegation to my principal's office complaining that we'd be giving homework during our lunch hour by the teacher. So you know, kids can do that, but certainly high school kids, if they wanted to rebel, you know, if enough students said we're not wearing it, you know, what is anyone going to do? You can suspend 300 kids.
And what about from a board policy, setting a bar for what qualifies as an exemption? Could we do that?
There is something you could do. You could set a policy that you will not suspend or discipline a child who refuses to obey the mandate.
That's good.
The governor can't force you to suspend anyone.
Interesting.
Order you to carry out his orders, but there's a limit to what you can do. You're not under any obligation to discipline a kid.
And that's very interesting. And we
I
got to
just
think
thought of
about
it right now. So
well, and what about setting a bar for exemption? You know, as long as you get a do you have to have, or say for
Absolutely.
emotional or mental stress, you know, could we say, well, as long as you have a social worker or somebody from, you know, from that level, like to lower the bar, so to speak, or could the parent themselves just make a claim that this is interrupting my child's emotional and mental well-being?
no,
Therefore-
you can't quite go that far.
Okay.
All right, the rule would require some professional to certify it, but I think you can set up a rule that says, that defines the category of professionals who can give exemptions. A social worker, a psychologist, a psychiatrist, any physician,
There's a licensed
physical
professional
therapist.
counselor, LPC, licensed professional counselor. That's a typical therapist without a
Precisely,
psychiatric degree.
a licensed professional counselor. I think you can set up a wide list of people whose exemption declaration you would accept as a district.
So how do we explore that, or what would you suggest? Because I think that's a good avenue that we could pursue, at least in our district.
Well, you basically talk to your council, get a resolution written up stating we will accept as a basis for exemption from Executive Order 251 the letter of any of the following licensed professionals who state there is a basis and need for a child to be exempt from the mask mandate. And you create a list of any of those licensed professionals. And there's probably a good dozen people who fall into that category, and types of professions rather. And you say, we will accept, and we direct all schools to honor any exemption letter from such sources. Now, you might end up with a school principal says, wait a minute, you're evading the order. I have a duty to enforce it. And then you're going to get an internal conflict between you and your administration. But most administrators are probably going to go along with what you say. So, and you can do it that way.
Yeah, it sounds like a reasonable policy from that standpoint. We're not mandating anything. We're just leaving it putting it into the parents' jurisdiction.
Right. And frankly, I think you might be in a position of passing a resolution that says we shall not, no child shall be disciplined by way of suspension, detention, being sent home for failure to wear a mask.
Yeah, we've already
That's
had
a pretty revolutionary approach, but frankly, you know, our Constitution has this tension built in. And, you know, you're saying to the kids, you've got to wear it, but you're also saying no one will be, you're issuing a policy. No school may discipline a kid who fails to. You don't tell the kids that, but they'll get the word out.
Right. Good.
So,
Yeah, I'm a firm believer in nullification. Thank you very much.
you're welcome.
All right, next board member.
How you doing, Bruce? This is Rich Casey from Ocean Gate in Ocean County.
Hey, Rich.
I appreciate you guys putting this together. My question pertains to the order and not the avenue you guys are going after, but what is your take on number 5? No municipality, county, and any or other agency, political subdivision of this state will enact or enforce any order, rule, regulation, ordinance, or resolution which will or might in any way affect with any way of the provisions of this order, or will or might in any way interfere or impede its achievement. That's a little sticky language, isn't it?
I think that's blatantly unconstitutional because he doesn't have the power to tell people what resolutions to pass, number one. You have independent powers. You are independent elected officials. The governor does not have the power to tell you what to do. And he does not have the power to tell a board member how to vote and what kind of resolution to introduce. And, he can't tell you, you may not introduce a resolution on the following subjects. He has no power to do that. If you do it, he has the power to go to court and say this should be deemed unenforceable. But he doesn't have the power a priori to order a board not to pass a resolution or a municipal government or anyone else. That's why I think you could pass a resolution that says, no student in this district shall be disciplined by way of detention, suspension, or other administrative process for the offense of failure to wear a mask.
Would you agree this was put in there to perhaps put a little fear into some groups, some boards, and put some question whether or not we should do it? I think.
I don't know. That may have been
Right.
language. Go ahead. Sorry.
No, I think this language was purposely put there for people to be discouraged to speak up.
Don't necessarily assume they thought of that. I haven't checked every executive order, but there've been 180 of them. He may have been carrying that language over from the original executive orders. I'm not sure he deliberately put it in specially for this. It may have been something they put in as a global statement originally. But certainly it does relate to this question. In my view, he has no power to do that. He can't tell you not to pass a resolution. He can say your resolution interferes and take you to court to stop it. Just like we're taking him to court to stop his executive order. But he doesn't have the power to say you can't pass the ordinance or resolution. We have something called home rule. The governor does not have the power to tell elected representatives they cannot act in their offices. It's interesting that we could go to court over. I don't think he has that power.
Yeah, we don't think either. We're meeting tonight as a board. We have a resolution to talk about and things what we want to talk about. But we're going to move forward, and I think that is unconstitutional. This particular part of his order.
I think it actually violates the First Amendment rights of members of these governing bodies as well. So to the extent to which the governor has the power to stop a local government agency, a board from passing ordinances or resolutions might be a state law issue. It might not be something the federal court can handle. However, it does violate the First Amendment rights of board members. He's telling you by decree, you don't have the right to pass an ordinance. That's within the scope of the federal court. So we could incorporate that into the federal court action if we chose to. I don't think any governor has such power to do that. It really is extraordinary.
I appreciate that insight on that. That's good.
Well, some of this I'm thinking about only now as you guys raise issues. And that it's a good meeting. We're doing more by way of discussing this than the governor ever did before he signed it. I want you to know. And one other issue is in the order, which people don't pay much attention to. Number one, it's indefinite until he cancels it. Number two, he authorizes the state police superintendent in his own discretion to make any additions or changes or amendments to the order. So the state police director is authorized by this order to issue any orders he wants, or she, whoever it is, to enhance this order. So the state police director can say, I want plexiglass around every desk now. I order 6 feet distance between all students and everyone else. I order an end to student athletics for the next 3 months. The state police superintendent is given unlimited power by this order. That's another element of its illegality, which we are mentioning in this case.
You good, Rich?
Thank you. Appreciate it.
You're welcome.
All right, next.
I mean,
one.
all of this, it's interesting because all of this is kind of a testament to the flexibility of our system. The governor's power is really hemmed in by a lot of what we're talking about. You just got to go to court and use it. People often don't.
Mhm. Next board member? If any? Okay.
I have a
Go
question.
ahead, Colette.
Yeah, Colette from Long Beach Island Consolidated School District. Just a question regarding the about the punishment. Apparently, like from Ocean County, they're telling us that we need to have the child picked up if they refuse to wear a mask.
Who's saying that?
Well, that's just the rumors that we hear, that, if a child isn't wearing one, we would have to call a parent to have them picked up. I don't know if it's true or false, but it was
There's
asked of
nothing in
me,
the
so I
order
figured
that
I would ask.
the order doesn't say that, and it leaves you all free in your districts to set up policies of how to handle it.
Okay,
In
good.
my
So I can
view,
squash that one.
right, you can squash that. There's a lot of rumors out there. In my view, I mean, when this all first started, there were a lot of crazy stories like the Massachusetts State Police stopping people going to the Berkshires from New York. You heard all sorts of crazy things that none of which were true. But there's nothing in the order that says that. I see Heather says that's what they've been told also. In my judgment, a district is free to decide how to implement this. In my view, frankly, you're only obligated to set the policy of mandatory mask wearing and to tell students you have to wear a mask. I don't think you have anything obligation to do anything beyond that. And I don't think you have any duty to send a kid home. And I don't think you have any duty to punish a kid. I think, in fact, it might be illegal to do that, but because it's not within the scope of things you can discipline a kid that's in the education law for. You're not allowed to tell kids you don't have to wear the mask, and you should tell them they have to wear it, but I don't think you have to discipline any kid who refuses. And I don't think the governor can force you to.
And it's not in the order. I mean, not that we believe in the legality of the order anyway, but there's nothing in the order that talks.
Well, looking at the order on its face, it doesn't say it must punish a kid. It doesn't say you must send a kid home. And frankly, if a kid says, I can't wear it, I have trouble breathing, I think your policy can allow that kid to sit there without it. Hell, if the kid has leukemia and has difficulty breathing or has a severe asthmatic problem, the order lets him not wear a mask. So it seems to me that, or in extreme heat, you don't have to wear a mask. So if it's 90 degrees out, nobody has to wear a mask in the school. Well, it seems to me if a kid says to a teacher, I can't wear this, I can't breathe, I'm getting splitting headaches, the teacher has every right under those rules to say you don't have to wear it. And the school board has every right to implement a policy allowing that. This is that give and take that you can use to fight this order. It just takes creative thinking. Logical thinking, but creative.
Colette, any other questions?
No, that was it. Thank you very much.
Okay, great. Thanks. Any other Board of Ed members? And then we can pass it on to the few parents that are here.
It really is interesting to me, actually, if extreme heat is allowed as an exemption in all cases, then why do we need it at all?
I know.
And what is extreme heat? It seems to me anything over 80 degrees probably would qualify. And that could be days and days in a row. And therefore, if you can allow the exemption, then why do you need it when it's 75 degrees? The same breathing is taking place. So if kids are going to be a source of infection, and for a 5-day period when it's very hot, we don't need to wear the masks, well, why do you need it for the next 5-day period? There's an inherent irrationality built into the order. I'm glad we're having this discussion. It's giving me ideas I haven't had a chance to think about.
The same thing with recess and PE. These are the same 20 kids in the class. They don't have to wear it for recess and PE, but they have to wear it for English. Same day. No mask, mask. It doesn't, there's no rationale to it.
Well, someone, Larissa just said the virus goes away after 80 degrees. Well,
It's a smart, it's a very smart virus.
that must be it. It's a smart virus.
I think we're good with all the board members. A parent, what parents want to ask questions? Just step in.
Actually, Simona was one of our clients, right?
Yes, I saw. Hi, Simona. She's one of our, yes.
Okay, so I'm here to answer more questions if you wish. We can go on a little while longer. Someone
my
said
name's-
students have to wear during gym. I think as a board, you can exempt gym outright, frankly. Okay, I think you have the power to do that.
Go ahead,
Yes, go ahead.
parent, you stepped in.
Sorry, go ahead.
Hi, my name is Mike. I'm in the Roseland School District.
Hi.
My question is, well, I just have a couple. I've been doing a lot of research for the last year in regards to constitutional law, Bill of Rights. This basically falls under Marbury versus Madison of 1803, correct? That
Well, go ahead.
basically that no law, even under an emergency, can supersede our amendment rights.
Not exactly. Marbury said that the Congress can't pass a law that's unconstitutional, and the court has a power to declare it to be illegal. But there's been a lot of doctrine that developed since that says if there's a compelling governmental need, then elements of the Bill of Rights can temporarily be set aside. So, remember Marbury's very early case, and it didn't deal with everything that later came down.
Right.
So the current doctrine is that where there's a compelling interest at stake, free speech or freedom of religion, government can intrude if it has a compelling reason. So, there was one famous case where a Native American group was prohibited from using peyote, even though it was part of their religious practice. And the court found that there's a compelling need to minimize dangerous drug use, and therefore the religious practice fell to the wayside for that interest. So that's an example. So it's not exactly correct. If there's a compelling governmental need or a substantial governmental interest, government can act, but it has to meet a pretty high standard. You can't just say it's a good idea. And by the way, the governor says in the order, doing this now because of significant uptakes in the number of cases is a good precaution. Well, merely because something's a good idea or good precaution doesn't meet that high test.
That
to
high
satisfy
test,
constitutional rights. So you're right. It's just that, it's developed a bit since Marbury.
Okay. And then I know you said something on extreme heat. I mean,
So the order says
breathing in
that's
and
an
out.
exemption.
Right, breathing in and out of a mask has extreme heat in the mask itself.
One student said to me, she feels she's building up heat inside of her because she's only breathing her own hot air, basically.
Right. I mean, it's only a matter of time before they hit 50,000 ppms and then they go faint.
Well, she said she's felt faint and lightheaded quite frequently. No one studied this. No one's analyzed this.
Yeah,
and
I have a
children-
OSHA background because I'm a insurance adjuster. I do inspections for a living.
Right.
So that's how I know about the carbon dioxide and carbon monoxide poisoning from wearing a mask, because I'm trained in OSHA. And if a kid's going to go to school, they should wear an N95 respirator, which kind of looks like that big humongous thing where you can actually breathe in and out of it, versus a paper mask that has 20 different pathogens on it within an hour.
Right. And the trouble is nobody's bothered to do a study about this. And it's true. Surgeons wear masks primarily so they don't end up spitting into an open wound, and also to prevent splashback. But they don't really prevent microbes from traveling. That's not really the purpose of a mask in a
Correct.
surgery suite. So, it's a very debatable point whether this really works. There's also a lot of discussion, and well, young kids don't really have facial hair. Some high school guys do, but when you have a beard, it generally is not. It's seen not to work. There was a case in Kentucky, I believe it was, or Florida. I forget which one. I have to look it up. In which an expert testified. He was a mask engineer, and he testified that none of this works for the following reasons. Only N95s will block respiration. Any facial hair will immediately invalidate the effectiveness, and normal masks allow microbes to pass through. And the court accepted that because there's no contrary evidence. So, there's a lot of debate about whether it really even does anything. And quite frankly, throughout the lockdown and masking period, for months, the cases kept rising. So, looking at the experiential evidence, it's not so clear it even worked in the first place. And I don't think the
Right.
state could demonstrate that when put to it. But there's been no real trial on it. And those few cases that have gone forward have won. So my
Okay.
feeling is the state won't be able to prove a compelling need. Okay,
Now, if I were a parent, this is my last question.
sure.
Am I allowed to ask the school to give my child mask breaks?
You
Or is that against
can,
the order too?
no. In fact, this is the point we've been discussing, that the governor said the school should set up its policy. Well, that directly says how you're going to implement this is in your hands. So the school should set up mask breaks. And how frequently should they be? Once every 2 hours? I don't think that's enough. I think probably every half hour is probably necessary for people. I don't know anyone who does this. I have lymphoma, actually. And well, it goes in remission on and off. But I recently saw my oncologist because when I got my vaccination, I had to do it in a surgical suite because I tend to get reactions. So we did it in the oncology suite. So he comes in with his assistant, and we had a whole gang of us there because my wife's a doctor, so everybody showed up. And he was constantly pulling his mask on and off his nose. And I observed it, and I was like laughing. It was this flimsy little mask, and he's in this oncology suite with desperately ill people, not me, but others. And it's constantly falling off his nose. He puts it back up, and a second later it falls down again. He constantly doing this the whole time. I was tempted to say, take the damn thing off. Why are you bothering? So I think that nobody can sit with this for more than probably 25 minutes without a break. And no one, and that's a good point. I'm going to make a note. There's been no study as to when we need breaks. And, I doubt any physician wears it for more than 15 minutes without pulling it down and taking a moment to break. My brother, who's an ophthalmologist, has been wearing, who's a bit of a nut, he's wearing 2 masks and a shield, and he's getting tired because he's not getting any oxygen. He doesn't take it off at all. I think it's actually dangerous, but the question is, how much time should go by before you take a break and breathe again? Okay.
Right.
Most surgeries are no more than a half hour to 40 minutes. There are long surgeries for multiple hours. What do surgeons do in that time? I wonder. There must be some protocol in which they back off from the table and take a breath. I can't imagine they go 8 hours without removing the mask in a long surgery, even 4 hours. And they're accustomed to it by training. A kid, I think, must have frequent breaks. And how often will that be? And I think the school district has the right to decide that. And I actually think it's a serious flaw in the executive order that it doesn't address this. And there's been no study done as to how frequently children need breaks.
Correct.
All right. And we've got developing bodies. A child body, even at their age 20, is different from the adult body. Even mentally, there are parts of the brain that don't develop till 21 or 22 in many cases. Do children need different respiration than adults? I have no idea, but I would imagine yes. So that's an issue. Your district has the right to set up that policy. I hope that's helpful. And this is helpful to me. It's giving me many ideas, so thank you all.
Hi, Bruce. This is Simona here. Nice to meet you eventually.
Nice to meet you, Simona.
I have a couple of questions. Now, it's clear to me after all the studies that I've done in the last almost 2 years that masks underpin the whole COVID culture. We remember all that in the beginning, they didn't see it fit to mandate it, but they realized the impact, better said, the benefit that can be achieved instilling fear, achieving obedience.
Well, that's part of it, making people sensitive to the crisis state. That's a large reason why government often does things.
So in the name of it, they're segregating children, grown-ups, discriminating, and now we see New York only allows based on a vaccination passport to access the main stores. Now, I've been thinking about this a lot since we've been using them for 18 months, and we still put them on children, as you said, but only in schools. Why don't, that's because they are assuming the asymptomatic transmission is a standing terminology, although I haven't seen any reports on that. Why don't we just mandate a cellular immunity test, you know, the T cells, the memory cells to be tested to see whether these children have already been exposed and they were granted immunity. And the reason for which I'm saying this is because my older son had it back in 2020 in January, where the doctors didn't know what it was. They send him home, they say, get antibiotic. I find my own ways to treat him. He's back, and now he has antibodies, the level of almost 4, and threshold is 1 after 18 months. So the doctor saying it must have been 2 months ago. Of course, you know, we just confine to our words until we feel safe to make a statement. So
well, the problem is, right, I take your point. Let me make a note. The problem is you get into a medical debate in court over what level of antibodies are necessary, whether the antibodies you develop from exposure is as good as from a vaccine. And once you're in that position in court, then the court's generally going to defer to the governmental agency's expert's view, because a governmental agency that's charged as an expert will be given deference by a court. The court won't absolutely rubber stamp it, but if you have 2 experts and one's with a government agency like the Commissioner of Health, and the court's generally going to accept the governmental agency's position because the legislature has given them that authority. So once we get into a battle of experts over these medical issues, it's much harder to win the case. That's why I want to predicate the case on the intrusion into the student's rights. It's almost impossible to win in court based on these medical issues.
So thank you for that. But then can we go on the avenue of claiming why the people that have survived this and have healed are not being considered? We only have 2 categories at this point. We know that the WHO changed the definition of immunity back in November to exclude natural immunity. We only have immunity from vaccination. And we know that these vaccines don't
I know,
offer.
but look what you just said. You just said the WHO,
Right.
WHO did that. So, you know, you've got an expert agency that is saying you must have the vaccine to get immunity. So what's the court going to do? It's going to be a battle of experts, and it's going to lean in the direction of the governmental agencies that have been charged with these responsibilities. So I really think in court, you're saying something that's very logical, but try to convince a judge which group of experts to accept. The court's always going to lean in the direction of an expert agency's view. That's why it's better to focus it on a head-on attack as to whether the state can demonstrate a true need to impose this on kids and nobody else.
All right, I understand.
I understand what you're saying, but also then it requires multiple passports. You've got natural immunity, vaccine immunity, and then the kid who doesn't have either must wear the mask, and they're stigmatized. So it doesn't really get us too far in solving the problem. That's the trouble.
Now I'm foreseeing this for using mandatory vaccinations. I've attended the Board of Education meeting last night, and I doubt any of the board members would be here because I saw them really keen on requiring to have their condition notified out in the open to see which children are traveling from where and how they're going to be quarantined and all that. Are we envisioning a lawsuit in this regard? Because still, this cannot be mandated. This is how humans will be able to choose.
Not right now. We're not.
We find out how many they have that are vaccinated and how many they are not, and then the minority will be forced to do that already. You know, although it impedes on individual liberties, and that has to stop.
Well, we're not really doing a vaccine issue here for a couple of reasons. One, there's been no mandatory order, and I'm not sure there will be until the FDA fully approves it. Secondly, that may not happen because the Delta variant is a new seasonal form of this, and it truly might need a new vaccine keyed to that variant. So the current vaccines might not ever get mandated. The other point is the Commissioner of Health has to go through an administrative process normally to do that. And they haven't done that yet. Now, they could issue an emergency order, but they're not going to do that when it's not fully approved, and they haven't. The other thing is, not everyone in the client group is necessarily opposed to vaccination. So I don't really have the authority to add that into this case right now. So that would have to be a separate lawsuit, I think. But I got to warn you, though, that there is a tradition in the law that childhood diseases are subject to immunization in public schools or any schools. It's going to be very hard to beat that if it's given full approval. Okay. So legally, I can tell you that's going to be very tough to beat if the vaccine is given proper FDA approval. It'd be very difficult to persuade a court to not require mandatory vaccine in public schools. So, you know, there are differences. This is not smallpox where you get one vaccine for life. You're going to need constant vaccines every year, and it is much more burdensome. So a court might see it differently, and that might be why there may never be a mandatory order, because it may not be supportable medically, because you're always going to need a new COVID vaccine, just like you need a new flu vaccine. So in any event, we're not there yet. So I can only work with what we have. We can't go to court yet over something that hasn't happened.
I understood. And the last thing would be, and I'm piggybacking on what Mike said, we've sent out with his help notices of liability, refusal, the right to refuse, and all these are stating that we are not consenting our children being subjected to experimental medical treatments. And this, in the end, this is what it is. This is an experiment, and we are not being informed over this as the FDA and CDC websites are stating. Now, if I send my children to school without a mask, what is their limit? What can they do? Can they say you're not allowed in school? Can they say that you be punished or suspended or?
Right. The order is broad enough that a school district could do that. I don't think a school district has to punish the kid, but the order is broad enough that a school could punish the child and send the child home.
Oh, well.
And then you've got a problem where if you eventually don't let your kid wear the mask and go to school, and you're not homeschooling, then you've got a truancy issue. Eventually that could come back to affect you, because the kid has to go to school of some sort. And so if a month goes by and the kid's not in school and is not homeschooled, and it's uneducated, then the state has a right to say you're not educating your child. And that becomes actually a criminal offense.
So if we decide, and this is the last issue I need clarification on, if we decide to homeschool our children, and we would like to pull out our contribution to taxes that goes to the board.
You can't do that. You can't do
Do we have
that.
an avenue to fight for that?
No.
No, not at all.
Mm-mm.
Okay.
Even if you have no children, you've got to pay school taxes.
I
But it's
understand, but
choice.
can it be deviated to another form of school? I understand those that don't have, they have to pay
No,
tax.
but what happens is you're entitled to certain services from the school district. For example, if your kid needed speech therapy and you're educating them at home, they have to get the speech therapy provided by the district. But no, there's no tax basis for that. You can't get your money back.
Can you recommend, thank you, a resource where I can document myself on what services can be covered in the case of?
I honestly don't know, Simona. It really depends on the given school district. There are all
Right.
sorts of special services now, if someone says you don't have a school choice, well, that's not true. You can homeschool your kid under a homeschooling program. So you can always do that, but you don't have a choice to take the school's educational program remotely. And as someone said, I think it was Jackie who made the point, we could argue the state should give that option because masks are burdensome and the kid should have a right to go virtually at home. I could add that in the case, but I'm afraid it might destroy the main point of the
No,
case.
I don't want that. You really put it well here. I didn't think of the connection between you. You're really good. Thank you so much. No,
You're welcome.
thank you. Appreciate it. God bless you for all you're doing.
Thank you, Simona. You too.
Thanks, Mara. Anybody else want to ask a question?
Yes,
have a
this is Linda. This is Linda from West Orange.
Hi, Linda.
Hi. You know what? This is confined to my granddaughter. My granddaughter gets extreme headaches, even normally. She's been to the doctor. She's been on medication. We're trying virtually anything for her headaches. She does wear a mask. She does get dizzy. She also gets sick to her stomach. And it's hard for her to have to deal with that when she comes out of school every day. Well, even before the mask, she would come out every day and say that her head is killing her, and it's hard for her to function. So would you advise that I just get a doctor's notice? Would that kind of like exempt her from having to wear the mask all day?
In my view, from what you're describing, she has a pretty significant medical condition, and I think she can get an exemption. Now, whether a doctor will do that, I don't know. But in my view, it qualifies under the order. So I think you should go to a doctor, or the parent should go to a doctor and explain the problem and ask for a letter saying she should be exempt from the mask requirement. Your doctor might not agree. Your doctor might say, well, you're right, but she's going to get the headaches whether she's masked or not. But I think it qualifies if the doctor would agree.
Okay.
Can I ask a question?
Yes.
So I presented this to my board in Super. I'm in Hopewell in Mercer County. Given that masks are an experimental medical procedure intervention, is there any requirement for the district to provide informed consent to parents outlining the known risks to long-term mask wearing?
Well, hang on one second. Let me make a note of this. Well, this is the point we're raising. One second. This is the point we're raising in the case, that no one has studied the impact of this, either medically or psychologically. You know, that nobody has examined, you know, what does it do to children to be in this position all day long? And also, no one's examined the medical implications of it. So, you know, I don't know whether there's an impact on lung development or respiratory development or other elements. If you're essentially breathing your own recycled air hour after hour, I mean, if these masks work, it really means you're breathing your own recycled air. You know, you can get some new air in as you inspire, but you know, what is the effect of that? You're kind of lowering your oxygen content overall gradually throughout the day. Has anyone studied this? As I mentioned to you, surgeons will wear a mask for a short period of time. Excuse me, I'm sorry. And other people will wear a mask in the supermarket. So you're in the supermarket 20 minutes, you take it off when you're in the parking lot, you're breathing again. The kid doesn't have that option. They're in there 6 to 8 hours. So has anyone studied this? In my view, it is experimental. It's not experimental in certain contexts, such as surgery, but it is certainly experimental to say that any human being should wear this all day long, especially a child whose developmental state is much different from adults. So I think that the order is infirm in part because it's not predicated upon any validating study that this is safe for children. And, you know, I think there's a common sense point of view. Now, could I get a pediatrician to sign off on this as an expert? Maybe, but the problem is I'll get another pediatrician to say the opposite. They don't see any basis to see any harm. And I don't really see that as possible. I think clearly it's harm. But in my view, it is experimental to do this to anybody on a long-term basis. And I think that it's not so much that there's a notice requirement of harm. The state hasn't examined the issue at all. And to me, that undermines its validity. I hope that helps.
Okay, thanks.
What has Hopewell had to say about it when you spoke with them?
Well, they didn't answer the question regarding informed consent. And I mean, they're just driving the whole narrative of masks and vaccines save lives. They've been really tough on medical exemptions for parents in the district. So we had a lot of parents show up and say, we don't consent, presenting concerns with potential health risks and documented. There have been studies, but nothing from the CDC, and they're taking all their guidance from
No,
either
there are no real studies at all, and the CDC hasn't identified any.
So they're being very dismissive.
If you were to get this into court, they could not support it. Now, one thing you could do is sue your school district. How many parents do you think are involved that are angry, that are active on this?
We have a group right now that's like about 80, and that's a new group. So I'm sure there would be quite a few.
Well, people have to take action, and you could sue your district on this issue. So if the districts suddenly start getting sued, they're not going to be very happy either.
Right.
So, that kind of action is necessary too. If they see 80 families in Hopewell, presumably equally well-educated as the board members, and they disagree, suddenly, lights may go off.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
But people have to be willing to do it. You can complain, but unless you're willing to take action, stuff will continue.
Yep.
As the saying goes, use it or lose it. So.
Can I just add something? This is Stephanie again from Brick. To your point with the medical exemptions, and maybe they gave you a hard time the first time COVID came out because there was a virtual option. And I think a lot of the districts didn't know kind of where they were to go with this. I think this time around, the way the mandate reads, and I agree with you, Bruce, that I think if you get creative, there are a lot of things that the district has with the support of the administration that you're able to do. Brick is accepting all medical notes from any parent that comes in with a medical note from a doctor that says whatever reason their child cannot wear a mask, they will be exempt. Because there is no other option. There is not a virtual option or such. So we are accepting that. We're also, I think a lot of districts can kind of feel where I'm going with this, in the sense that we're educators, our administration, and they're there, and our teachers are educators. They're not the mask police. So I think a big piece of how many mask breaks are the children having during the day, if we can't, if we don't win this suit and we have to move forward, with masks being a part of this more than we may want. I think that directly comes from that superintendent down to his other administrators, down to his principals, and down to the teachers. If the superintendent comes out and says, we're not the mask police, if kids need a break, give them a break. I think that goes a long way with how it'll be handled in the classrooms and how much time the teachers will allow students to be able to, sit at their desks and take a mask break.
One thing that's come out of this is I think the school boards have a lot of flexibility under this order.
But I think it's real, and I totally agree with you. And we have just kept that open dialogue with our administration, saying, what can we do? We want to keep the kids in school. But these are issues. We have a large special needs population. We have a large population of kids that are having issues breathing, within their masks. So what can we do? Not breaking the law, but accommodating the needs of our students and their social and emotional health, as well as their physical health. So, we as a district have been able to, come up with some of these different things that we are willing to do that fall within the guidelines of the mandates. We're not suspending anyone, but we are going to hand a child who comes in a mask and ask them, please put it on and go to your class. If you need a mask break, take it off when you sit at your desk and take your break. We're encouraging our teachers to do a lot of things outside. We're starting the school year because we do not have air conditioning throughout, the way we ended our school year with masks optional. Because again, he left that vague as far as what is extreme heat. Well, extreme heat to me is different than something that may be extreme heat to someone else. So, that's what we decided as a district that we're doing, and we're talking to our parents about it. But here's what concerns me when people start putting everything on Facebook, is that here we have this mandate that actually gives districts a lot of wiggle room if you want it. and you can actually listen and work with your parents and districts and with your students and with your staff members to get what everybody needs to have a, to make the best out of a difficult situation. But, does, all this stuff going up on Facebook or parents complaining that, this one is doing it in this district, but not another district. What stops the governor from coming in and changing the mandate and now saying this is what the district will have to do? You know what I mean? So I'm not, that concerns me when we start, this type of stuff. Is there are a lot of districts out there that are doing these things that we're talking about, or putting these things in place. So how do we ensure that he doesn't come back if we lose this lawsuit and slap a harder mandate on us? Hello? Did I cut out?
No, I'm back. This is Bruce.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah,
Okay.
no, I heard you. I just took a break for a moment. Let me say this. If we win, I don't think the governor is going to come back with anything else.
Mhm.
I think that's very unlikely.
And I agree with you on that, because I think he just lets it go at that point.
Yeah, and I think if we lose, I don't think the governor is going to come back with anything else.
Okay.
I think he's going to have had enough, because he's running for re-election. He's certainly not going to make it harder. He's gone out of his way not to impose any other mandates elsewhere. It's obvious, and I apologize to any teachers who are part of the union, but it's obvious he's doing this only because the teachers union is demanding it. He does not want to be in conflict with a large union during an election. He also knows that if he loses 3 or 4% of the vote he had last time, he may lose the election. And that happens in New Jersey, and no Democrat's been reelected in 40 years. So, if you recall, Democrats go 1 term, and then Republicans often get 2 terms. So he knows that history. And if he loses 3 or 4% of those who voted for him who were independent last time, well, that's a very large shift. And if he loses the union support at the same time, he has another problem. So he's trying to balance everything. That's why he's not putting this burden on anyone else, only on school children, because he figures he'd rather not antagonize a large union instead of worrying about 1 or 2% of the vote that might change. So, but I don't think he's going to do anything worse than what he's done. I could be wrong. He could pick up what New York City is doing, but he hasn't. And I think he knows if he does that, he's going to lose the election. And I think he's very worried about that. New Jersey has a lot of independent voters, and we saw there were large majorities that went to Chris Christie, in his 2 terms. So he knows that the electorate can shift rapidly. And so I don't think he's going to make it worse. But I would say what Stephanie's saying is right. It requires courage by school districts, or creativity rather, to find ways to do what's working for you. And there's a huge area in which you can regulate on your own. And I think you should.
If I could ask you specifically to that point, which is what I want to ask, I'm coming from Warren Township in Somerset County. Our school district has taken it upon themselves to make an enormous amount of changes under the new COVID rules, regardless of the pushback from parents. There were petitions.
What district I'm saying, Heather?
Warren Township in Somerset County.
Okay.
And for example, last year there was a petition that went out asking for changes to certain rules that were being made, and asking for more days in school, because we did not get back to 5 days until the end of the year, and they were still only half days. They discounted 3/4 of the petition because they didn't like how people signed their names. Like, they will find any way to push back against parents that are not agreeing with them. Knowing that there were almost 500 signatures in a district of 15 to 1,600 students, I kind of thought that was a pretty large percentage to indicate the feeling of the parents. My question is, we're now getting this mandate again, and our district and our Board of Education does not answer us in anything other than this is the rule, this is the law, live with it or move. What can we do? Like, what is our recourse? How do we they refuse to take any action. Their answer is always that it's illegal. This is what the governor says, and this is what we have to do. You know, I've spent a year and a half fighting this, and I was probably the biggest cheerleader for our district prior to that. I went to every board meeting. I've been asked to sit on the board. It's not my place for me. I would not do well there, but I have been president of multiple PTOs and been involved in school in every capacity. So I am there for the schools and all the time that they need us. And we come back looking for answers and we get nothing. And our board lawyers on the retreat have indicated, do not speak to the public. You know, we get no communication. So I'm trying to understand, where do we go from here to get to a board like Stephanie's, where they're willing to listen and they're willing to try for the constituents that put them in these positions?
Well, you could sue your board on the grounds that they haven't implemented a policy that reasonably provides for breaks and special treatment, et cetera. And you could put your board up to the test, get a group together, get a lawyer and sue on the grounds that they're not creating a policy at all. They're not being reasonable. They're not mandating mandatory breaks. You could do all sorts of things and force them, you know, through it. So that's really what you would have to do. Excuse me 1 second.
That's okay. I apologize. My video is not on. I had to go somewhere, but I'm still listening everything. This is Kelly. Also, these people were elected. So I would ask, are there any board members up for re-election and board members running against them right now?
Yeah, I mean, you could certainly vote them out of office, and that's one option. Another option is to sue them and say you're failing to implement a policy that gives fair treatment to students. We need breaks for students every 30 minutes. Go to court and say it. You know, get a pediatrician to say, yes, kids need regular breaks.
Kelly,
Get a psychologist.
Kelly, to your point, actually, it's very telling that both our board president and 2 other sitting members are not rerunning in the election in November. And in my opinion, I think that says a lot about whether they agree or disagree with how the board is handling it. And I think if they must be in the minority, then they just feel they can't fight anymore. And
yep,
that's kind of where I feel we are. And I just try to make as much noise to as many parents to see these things, because I think people are afraid to go up against, I don't know, I guess they feel this school board has a power, I don't know, to do something that I don't know that they do.
One of my favorite lines that
you gotta
that
recognize.
Bruce,
Go ahead.
yeah, I'm sorry, go ahead. One of my favorite lines that Bruce said, because we've had several Zoom meetings with angry parents whose board ignores them, superintendent ignores them. And Bruce says they'll ignore you until you sue. Force them to pay attention to you.
Yeah, you need to sue and force them to pay attention, and people have to make that commitment. It's not always easy to find lawyers who understand how to do this sort of thing. Frankly, a lot of lawyers are kind of narrow in their thinking and they don't really know what to do. You might hear a lot of lawyers say, there's nothing you can do. They have the right to do this. You can't challenge the governor. I mean, that's just nonsense, but that's how a lot of lawyers think. So, you know, it's a tough problem, but you got to get people willing to do that. Usually it's just going to be a few people who bring the lawsuit. But if you do it right, you can make progress. And that's the best I can say. All right. But we're doing it on a statewide level. Okay. So that's one solution.
I am very grateful for that, for all of you, for what you've put together and for getting it out to people.
Sure.
Thank you.
I'm not going to be able to stay on too much longer, actually. So
This is Linda again. Can you just tell me one thing, like what's the difference between like way Florida has been treating their students? They've been in school all year and nothing's been mandated. So why can't we compare what Florida's doing to what New Jersey's doing? And that should be like not allowed to do that. Can you present that?
Yeah,
when you go to
to the board, you can present that, but they're not going to listen. They're going to say, look at all the number of cases in Florida. So they're going to take raw data and they're going to say they're doing that, but look what's happening. They're having all these cases.
But you know what Florida is doing, because they let I'm sorry, but they let other people come into the state, which also surged up their numbers. Because before when school was in previously, the kids were in school with no problems, but now it's surging for other reasons that other people were brought into their state. And
Yeah, that may be, but the problem is it's very hard to prove why it happens this way in certain places. Florida has a huge tourist business and we don't. So that is a point, that they may have differences. But the problem is when you deal with these raw statistics, the board's going to say, sorry, they have 25,000 new cases. I'm sorry. Are you all there? Sorry about that.
Yeah.
And let me just shut this so it doesn't happen again. So the problem is you can't really get into a battle of these statistics. But what you can't, but in Florida, they also have a different political, will. And there are different laws, actually. They have a privacy provision built into the state constitution. We don't have that directly in our constitution. So there are different laws that the courts use to set up different standards. But you could argue that, but I think the board's going to scream back and say, haven't you watched CNN? Don't you see how many cases there are in Florida? So the trouble is it just becomes a battle of raw statistics.
Okay, all right. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Anyone else at this point?
I have one question. I'm
Oh,
sorry.
yes.
It's mind-boggling to me. I can't understand why we would have to get a medical exemption or any type of exemption for a mask, because it's been implemented as a medical device and it's being used against its basic description. It says in the box, it's not intended to block or stop the spread of a virus. However, we're being forced to use it in that capacity. So they're pretending like this is a legit medical device and we have to use it. But every disclaimer on every box says it's not.
Yeah, well, you're reading, with all due respect, you're reading too much into the box. It's like if you open a Band-Aid box, it says sterility guaranteed until open. Basically, they're saying not guaranteed to block transmission. They don't want to be sued in case you get sick. So they tell you on the box, not guaranteed. But there are many medical people who will turn around and say, yes, masks can be helpful in blocking transmission. So don't look too much into what's on the box. The problem is that logically, if you wear a mask and your breath is inhibited from coming out, maybe you do block some transmission. But it's not clear, and these viruses will go through all the openings anyway, probably. And you can get different medical people on different sides saying different things. So unfortunately, you can't rely on the box. That's just done for legal purposes. But there will be groups of experts who will say it does work. Some will say it doesn't work, and that's the fight. And we're trying to avoid that in this case.
Oh, gotcha. Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Anyone else? I see 4 hands up. Kelly, should we just call on people? How about anyone who's not asked yet? I guess everyone has. So, well, we have time for the last ones, but I do have to stop in about 5 minutes. Okay. Yes, Tammy. Okay. Lisa, did you want to say anything? Your hand is still up. Okay. Linda, did you have something?
No, sorry, I didn't know how to take my hand down.
Lorraine, your hand is still raised. Do you have something?
Yes, thank you so much for everything you've said, and I'm really understanding everything. I don't want to convolute it, everything you've said, but don't we also have just like a constitutional right to breathe? I mean, freely, or is that just
You definitely have
already said?
You definitely have that.
Yeah.
But that's easier said than proven, so to speak. We have a right of privacy, and that's bodily privacy too. And the government can't, for example, tell you wear a helmet over your head all day just to be safe in case a car hits you. The rules have to be reasonable. And the problem is, if a mask can be used without killing you and without causing major health issues, your right to breathe is not necessarily impeded. But the better argument is your right to live normally is impeded. And your child's ability to associate with others is impeded. If kids won't talk to each other because of the mask, and their whole basic right of association is impeded. So that's the approach we're taking.
Yeah, no, I didn't want to, like I said, convolute what you already said, which was excellent. And thank you so much.
Yeah, I am.
One other quick question, a little bit unrelated, but related to if you do decide to pull your kids out early for a short time while the case is still, in the courts, do you know the answer? Would your children be allowed to participate in the sports from the school?
If you don't send your kids to school, they're not going to let them participate in sports.
Okay, because you had said something about certain things, but I guess that was just things that were maybe necessary, like speech therapy or something.
Oh, no, that's if you avail yourself of homeschooling. If you avail yourself of homeschooling, almost certainly they have to let your kid participate in district sports.
Yeah, that was what I was asking. So
Sure, but if you
they
just
would.
take your kid out for 2 weeks because you want to see how the case goes and you haven't
No, if I
filed,
pulled them out saying, you know, I'm going to homeschool, but can they participate in the local sports because they've been participating?
right, but it's a little bit different than that. To homeschool, you have to actually submit a plan, I think. And that plan has to be seen by the relevant agency. And I think it gets approved. So you can't just say, I'm going to educate my kid at home. There's a plan you have to fill out.
Right, okay.
So once you do that and it's approved, then the school district, I think, I haven't checked specifically, but I think they have to let you do other things in the district that other kids can do, such as organized sports.
Well, it's actually up to the discretion of the superintendent unless there's a policy. And we happen to have a policy that allows children that are homeschooled to participate in our extracurricular activities, as well as one of our Catholic middle schools. They're allowed to participate in our activities that are not offered in the middle, in that school, that middle school. So I think you might want to check with your district on that. But I know that a lot of districts, you know, even if it's not a policy, it's up to the discretion of the superintendent. So,
well, yeah, that may be how it shakes out, but legally they have to let your kid go. You know, it may be.
Oh,
that-
they have to let them go homeschool, but
No, they have to let you go. No, they have to do more than that. It may be that there's no policy, it falls to the superintendent. But legally, in my judgment, they must let your kid do extracurricular sports, have speech therapy, things you can't offer at home. But
oh, definitely the speech therapy and things like that. I think the sports may be, that's a question if there's not a policy in place. So I mean, I would ask the district, I could be wrong, but we happen to have a policy
in my
that in the
judgment, they
6
have
years
to.
I've been on the board, we put that in place when I came on the board.
Right. Well, in
So-
my view, legally, they have to let a kid do that, but obviously you have to hash it out with your school district.
But you're saying in your judgment, you're leaning toward, you believe they have to offer it. They have to allow.
I mean, the homeschooling can't create a football team.
Right,
So if the district has a football program, there's no reason a kid who's homeschooled can't be on the football team. So in my view, you know, due process and equal protection require they extend that opportunity to every tax-paying family, well, every family in the town that can make use of it. Just because you're homeschooled doesn't mean your kid can't be on a football team. There's no difference physiologically between a homeschool kid and a kid in the district in terms of playing sports. So I think they have to give those extracurricular opportunities to you. Now, in my judgment, I don't think you can homeschool and be told, no, you can't be on the football team. So that's my view as a lawyer.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Anybody else? You're welcome. Thank you. And
All right, excellent.
Nicole, your hand is still up. Did you have something?
No, thank you.
Okay. So Kelly, if there's nothing else, I think I'd have to stop now.
Yep, okay, great. Thank you so much, Bruce.
Thank you
Sorry
so
for
much.
the noise.
You're welcome,
you very
everybody.
much.
Thank you for all your ideas. It was
And
great.
this is
you.
recorded, so I will be
Thank you
posting
so
it.
much.
All right, excellent. I left my email on the chat. I'm downloading the chat and I will post this meeting as well. And I
Thank you
think
so
we got
much.
a great start. So thank you. Have a good time, everybody.
Thanks. Have a good day.
Bye-bye. Thank you
Thank
again,
you all.
Bruce.
You're welcome. Thank you all.
You guys posted, please. Thank you.
Bye-bye. Thank you. Kelly, thank you. Are you there? Kelly, are you still there? Okay. All right. Thank you, everyone. Take care.